It gives me great pleasure to introduce a man who, at the age of 32, was elected to the United States House of Representatives, served in the U.S. Senate for 12 years, and was elected by his peers to the position of State Republican Conference Chairman. He became one of the most successful government reformers in our history, taking on Washington's most powerful special interests from the moment he arrived on Capitol Hill. He was also an author and floor manager of the landmark Welfare Reform Act that has empowered millions of Americans to leave the welfare rolls and enter the workforce. He fought to maintain fiscal sanity in Washington before it was in fashion, fighting for a balanced budget and a line item veto. He bravely proposed reforming entitlements, cutting spending, and even developed a spendometer that added up the cost of Democrat amendments to spending bills. He served on the Senate Armed Services Committee, where he led the fight before the attacks of September 11th to transform our military from a Cold War force to meet today's threats, and he was a leader of the U.S.-Israeli relations. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming former U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lena. I appreciate that. Congratulations again on an absolutely wonderful dinner. Thank you all for coming out and supporting the Republican team. And as your chairman just said, if Michigan goes red, America celebrates on election night in November. So we need you. It is great to be here in Michigan. I'm really excited to be back here in Oakland County. I've spent a fair amount of time here in the state of Michigan, although, you know, I gave a speech today at the Detroit Economic Club and talked a little bit about my economic plan for the future. And as I tend to do, I always talk about my roots and talk about my grandfather. And I failed to mention, you know, I talked about my grandfather a lot because he came here to this country, and I always talk about he worked in the coal mines until he was 72 years old and sort of clawing his way to freedom for me. What I didn't mention, and I failed to mention, was when my grandfather first came, he actually came to Detroit and worked in the auto factories for 2 years. And so I have a little history here in Southeast Michigan. And unfortunately, he lost his job in 1927. Ended up going home, which was good for my aunt because that's when she was conceived. And then came back and ended up in the coal mines of southwestern Pennsylvania. And it's those roots, growing up, the grandson of a coal miner and growing up in a steel town of Butler, Pennsylvania, that have forged me as someone who understands the greatness of our country and the importance of the industrial heartland of America. One of the reasons that I decided to get involved in this race because I thought it was important that we had someone out there speaking for folks who seem to be out there paddling alone in our society, folks who have been left behind by our economy. And so I went out and started crossing Iowa and knocking on, well, equivalent of knocking on doors, 381 town hall meetings to meet with people and talk to people about a vision for America that included an economic plan that included everybody, a plan that also talked about the importance of the foundational institutions of our country. My tour that I toured around when I was traveling around the country, around the state of Iowa, was called the Faith, Family, and Freedom Tour, because in addition to having a strong economic plan that focused on getting everybody the ability to rise, I also talked about the vital importance of the American family, the importance of that foundational unit of our country. And as I talked in more detail at the Economic Club today, I talked about this vision for America, a vision for America that's built on the concepts that, well, made America great, concepts that C.L. Bryant talked about before, how we are a great country, not because we have a great government, not because we have a strong economy, not because we have a strong military. We are a great country because the roots of America, the foundation of our country, is different than every other country in the history of the world. It's a foundation based upon a document that we don't hear much about. We hear a lot about an important document, and thank God for the Tea Party who has resurrected the Constitution of our country. Constitution is a very, very important document. It is the operator's manual of America. And we have been in a malfunction mode in Washington because we have been operating the machinery there outside of the guidelines of this Constitution. But the Constitution is the operator's manual, the how of America. But the why of America is something different. Who we are. I think one of the great struggles that Americans are having, the frustrations that we're having, is that we feel so divided. There's so much that seems to separate us. We have a president of the United States who I call the divider-in-chief, who stands up every single day and pits one group against another. We see a Congress that is horribly unpopular. We see a country that is dysfunctional. And the reason is because we don't have leaders who remind us about what brings us together, reminds us who we are and what made us great, why we were able to grow from this little country and build the most powerful economic, military engine in the world. We did it because we had a foundation that was in the other founding document, the Declaration of Independence. And that document said something unique in human history. It said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what is at the heart of American exceptionalism. That's what makes us different. That we understand that rights are not created by the government, that are not given to us by a sovereign, but in fact are unalienable. They come from God, and the Constitution's job is to do one thing: protect those rights. With that foundation, our government was created to allow people, men and women, to be able to reap the fruits of their labor. And with limited federal power, and yes, limited state power, we were able to build this society that Alexis de Tocqueville talked about in the book Democracy in America. America was different, certainly different from France. France had a constitution too, just like the American Constitution in many, many ways. But France was failing. France turned to tyranny. And the difference, France was not founded on a Declaration of Independence of God-given rights. France was founded upon three words: liberty, good; equality, good; but fraternity, brotherhood, not fatherhood. The rights came from each other. The rights came from those who controlled the levers of power. Once we throw God out of the equation, once our rights come from the government and from each other, we ultimately end up at the guillotine, wielding power, forcing people to do things against their will. In a book written recently by Niall Ferguson, a Harvard professor, he interviewed a man from China who had been involved in a commission, who studied at the time then in the 1970s that China was looking to open up. And they were studying what made America great. And they went through all the things, the military, the economy, the form of government. And they realized, he said in this book, this man from China said, we realized 20 years ago what made America unique. Faith. A belief in God-given rights and the dignity of every human person. That's the key to America. And we built this country from the bottom up. One family, one church, one school, one hospital, one civic and community organization. All of these little institutions. These little institutions that populated America. Why? Because government was weak. People didn't come to this country because they wanted government to take care of them. They came to this country because they just so desired to be free, to provide for themselves. This spirit, the American spirit, in building things. The Detroit spirit in building things, making things. They weren't looking for any help from anybody else. They built networks in civil society, rich civil society, civic and community organizations, community aid societies. This was the fabric of America. It was a rich and thick fabric. One that was the model for the world. And what happened? Over time, well, isn't that always the issue with society? Time. We get farther and farther away from the flame that burned brightly. We begin to forget what made this country great. Barack Obama said recently, when he was asked about Paul Ryan's budget about 9 months ago, he went on and listed a whole bunch of entitlement programs: Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, housing assistance, unemployment insurance. And he said this: America is a better country because of these commitments. And as he read from his teleprompter, I'll go one step further, he said. America was not a great country until these commitments. America was not a great country until the government grew by taking your money and giving it to people in power in Washington and redistributing it to you as they saw fit. That, in Barack Obama's world, is the greatness of America. That is what makes America unique in his eyes. But as we all know, that's what makes America like every other country in the world, that rules you from the top down. America is a great country because we believe in a great society being built from the bottom up. A great society that trusts free people. One of the great things that this country has shown the world is the ability for people, free people, to change the world. At the time of the Declaration, life expectancy in America was 35, as it was at the time of Jesus Christ. And in 235 years, we have doubled life expectancy because of America, because we believed in you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a lot of speakers saying this election's about freedom. It is. It's about what kind of country you're going to leave to the next generation. Whether you're going to leave a country that's going to be free and safe and prosperous, or whether we will re-elect Barack Obama and he will finish the job he started. I would not be in this race if it wasn't for the issue of Obamacare. I think that's the game changer for our country. Obamacare is the linchpin. It has taken what used to be a government that would just help people out on the margins of life, just people who were disabled or those who were elderly, and now has created a program that every single American will be dependent upon the government for their health and their life. That is a fundamentally different America than what our founders created. This is the most important election of your lifetime. If we do not repeal Obamacare, if we do not stop the government from being involved in your personal decisions, if we do not reject the idea that government can create rights and then tell you how to exercise those rights, then we will be the generation that lost faith with the greatness of America. That's the big issue. That's the clear contrast. That's why I think we need to nominate and elect somebody as our nominee who can go out and tell the story about who we are as Americans. Tell it from someone whose parents and grandparents came to this country because they believed in an America that believed in them. Tell it from someone who has a record that can go out and talk about how important freedom is, how it's transformed not just the world, but how it's transformed every family and every community in America. And be able to go out and draw that contrast based upon their record. Be able to paint a picture of an America that puts people to work, not makes them dependent. It's a very different vision that I have for folks who are working Americans, blue-collar Americans. My vision is one that says that we need to compete, that we need to go out and get government out of the way and create opportunities by taking the corporate tax on manufacturing and zeroing it out so we can compete against China and Mexico and the rest of the world. That we need an energy policy that says to our manufacturers, that says to the people in this country who want to keep their jobs here, that we will have safe and affordable energy and plentiful energy so you can rely upon it. And yet we have an administration that is doing everything they can to undermine our ability to be energy self-sufficient. Alaska, 500,000 barrels a day come from the state of Alaska. Within 10 years, those will be gone. Why? Because they're depleting, and when the pipeline, the oil put in the pipeline goes under 350,000 barrels a day, the pipeline doesn't flow anymore. And so we'll lose that production. It'll be shuttered. Mexico, which now gives us 1.5 million barrels a day, in 5 years will be an importer of oil as their fields are depleted. Venezuela, that gives us 2.5 million barrels a day. Well, guess what? China is building a refinery in Venezuela, and that petroleum will now go to China, not to the United States. In the face of almost 5 million barrels a day being drained in the next few years, we have Canada with oil sands and the Bakken in North Dakota with oil shale. And they want to build a pipeline so we can get millions of barrels to replace that. And what does the President of the United States say? No, build a pipeline and send it to Canada, and send it to China. This is a president who is disarming America economically, robbing us of our freedom, controlling more and more power in Washington, D.C. We need to have someone who can go out and say, Mr. President, give us our freedom back. Allow Americans the opportunity to provide for themselves and their families. Give us the tools so we can create manufacturing jobs, so we can produce energy in this country. Build the Keystone Pipeline. Open up ANWR. Open up offshore. Drive down the price of energy so we can create jobs in this country. It's also the regulatory burden. I can't tell you the number of business people I've talked to in every corner of the state, and I've been to every corner of the United States. I've been to Washington, to Florida. I've been to Maine, to California. And everywhere I go, I hear the same thing. The overreach and the overburdening regulations. In the past two administrations, Clinton and Bush, in 16 years, they averaged about 60 regulations a year that cost over $100 million a year. Just last year alone, President Obama promulgated 150 in 1 year. He is crushing and destroying the goose that laid the golden egg, American free enterprise. He doesn't believe that business people should be trusted with freedom, that the government knows best how to run your business, how to be fair with your employees, how to be safe. We can't trust businesses. We can't trust states. We've got to give that power to Washington, D.C. And he's created bill after bill, whether it's Obamacare and micromanaging your health, whether it's Dodd-Frank and telling you what loan you're going to get, whether it was cap and trade and trying to push that through to tell you what light bulbs and what power you can use. And this is a president who doesn't believe in you. We need someone in this election, unlike in 2008 when Americans were looking for someone that they could believe in. We need a president who believes in you. That's the fundamental difference. We also need a nominee who understands the importance of families. Do you realize that in America today, when I say a family, I'm talking about the family as an economic unit. The word economy comes from the Greek word home. The first economy is in the home. If we don't have strong homes, then we can't have a strong economy. We can't have limited government. We can't have lower taxes. When families break down, government gets bigger. In America today, we have a chilling statistic that if in two-parent families, we have a poverty rate in America of 8%. In single-parent families, as heroic as single mothers are in trying to hold everything together and provide as well as nurture, as well as care for their children, the failure rate is higher economically. The poverty rate among single-parent households in America is approaching 40%, 5 times the rate of married families. And guess what else has happened? That number is dramatically increasing. 30 years ago, 71% of people in America over the age of 18 were married. Now it's 51% are married, and it's dropped 5%, the most rapid decline just in the last 3 years. Will have a huge impact in our ability to rise in society. Will have a huge impact in the size and scale of our government. You go into the neighborhoods in America where families are broken, what will you see? You will see government in a huge way involved in people's lives. Chuck Colson, who's a good friend, started prison fellowship when he came out of prison in the 1970s. And he told me at the time there were 250,000 people in prison in America. There are now 2.5 million people in prison in America. And 70 to 80% of them grew up without a father in the home. Ladies and gentlemen, the family as an economic unit is an essential building block of a free society. It's an essential building block of a conservative agenda. You want to go out, you want to go out and appeal to a broad swath of people across the state of Michigan, across this country. You talk about issues that hit them at their table. What are we going to do in government to help restore and rebuild the American family? One of the things I do in our tax plan is triple the child deduction. Did you know under Obamacare that there is a $10,000 penalty for average income families between if you live together under Obamacare or you're married? If you live together, you get a $10,000 tax break. We are doing things systematically to undermine this great institution. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the big issues of the day. Foundational freedom, fundamental freedom. And the American family and that institution has to be renewed and restored. We are very blessed to be here at a time when we can actually change that. The American public is rising up. They understand what's at stake in this election. You all do. That's why you're here. You all understand that freedom is at stake. You all understand that you have an obligation as stewards of a great inheritance to pass on something better than you were given, and we may, just may, if we don't get our act together, be the generation that does. Karen and I are blessed. We have 7 children, ages 20 to 3.5. It's not... It's not the best time for me to be running for president. But I'm running because, just like you, you're concerned about your kids. You're concerned about what you're going to leave behind. And I felt very blessed to be here at a time when America needs us. Lots of generations come and go in America, and, well, you can sort of get your kids off to school and go to work and participate in your community organizations, go to church, and you know what? America's going to be fine. We don't live in such a time. We live in a time of great consequence. And Michigan is in the center of it. You have an opportunity to be a game changer in this primary. You have an opportunity to be a game changer in the general election. To elect somebody who understands was at the heart and soul of America is about, who can go out and talk to the American people and remind us who we are, what brings us together. I was at a debate the other day with Howard Dean. Remember him? Yeah, okay, you do remember him. It was at Northwestern University, and he was asked the question, what makes America great? And he said, diversity. No, I said, what makes America great is that with diversity, we can come together. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. We can bring America together by reminding Americans why we are a great people, what we've done to transform this world from the bottom up, not the top down. When the signers of the Declaration of Independence inked their names, they realized that they were signing a document that was against declaring independence against the greatest power maybe in the history of the world at that time. And they realized this was this tiny country with a ragtag army that had probably very little chance of success without God's intervention. But they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Interestingly, they pledged it to each other. They said, we pledge to each other. That's the greatness of America, is that we're in a common bond. We look to each other first, to our families, to our communities. It's the uniqueness and greatness of our country. Reagan talked about this in his farewell address. He said the last thing he said to the American people as president was he was concerned that America was forgetting who we were, what made us special. That's why I always talk about our founders and our founding documents. To always remind you that we come from a great and rich inheritance that is the light for the world. That's why people want to come here, still want to come here by the millions. They line up to come, not because of our government programs. They got government programs. They come because they want to be free. Our founders signed this, knowing they were signing in all likelihood their death warrants. And these were people of means. These were people of property, status. And they signed that document to give you, each and every one of you, something unique in the world. And they pledged their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. Well, tonight, I am not asking you to pledge your life. Although, thank God, every single day in this country, men and women step forward and put the army, the uniform of the military on, and do, in fact, pledge their lives for the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. I'm not asking you to pledge your fortune. Although if you want to go to ricksantorum.com, or for Ron's sake, go to the RNC, there's no greater gift you can give to the next generation than freedom. There's no better investment of your time and money than freedom. What I am asking you to do is to pledge your honor. You stand on the shoulders of your parents and grandparents. Your duty is to uphold the honor of your family. We don't use that term much in America anymore. But it is a vitally important thing to understand your response, your place in history. Your place in history. We don't think about that. But this is a historic election. And Michigan is in a historic place in that election. You stand upon the shoulders of your ancestors, the folks that built America right here. The pride that you have in this town of what you've done for this country. I come from steel country. We feel that same pride about what we did to forge a great and powerful nation. And there's no area of the country that can take more credit than that, than you right here. And therefore you hold a great degree of honor here in Michigan. You helped build America. You helped create wealth. You moved people. You created opportunities by what you built here. It's amazing what you've contributed to the greatest country in the history of the world. You're not done building. Your honor is at stake to stand up in this election and to do your duty, to stand for the things that made us special, to stand up for the founding principles of our country, the things that bring us together. Does anybody really in America doesn't believe that all men are created equal? That people don't believe that we have rights just because of who we are? If we can start there, we can build this great nation again. One family, one community, from the bottom up. We can dismantle the architecture of huge and big government. Why? Because we're going to have an alternative that says we're going to rest the power and the responsibility in you. We're going to give you the freedom to exercise that. People are looking for a vision. They're looking for how we can claw our way out of these problems. And they're not looking for government to do it. They're looking for someone who believes in them. Ladies and gentlemen, show America that you believe in yourselves. Show America that our better days are ahead of us. Show America that you're not done building here in Detroit. Show America that our best days are ahead of us. Nominate someone who has that bold vision, who has the strength of character, who has the bold plan to build America, to create a great country, to renew our freedom and opportunity. And if you do, we will win this election, we will restore America, and America will be that shining city on the hill. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.